Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Avani Ratan and I welcome you all to today's lecture on social cognition. So, what is social cognition? Imagine walking into a party, you see someone raise an eyebrow at you. In less than a second, you're already thinking, did I do something wrong? Is my shirt weird? So, that's social cognition in action. So, social cognition refers to how we process, how we store, and apply information about other people and social situations. So, think of it as the mental toolkit we use to navigate our social world. From deciding whether to trust a new person we meet to understanding why someone acted in that way. Our brain have limited processing capacity. So like a computer with limited RAM, when we encounter too much social information at once, which is also known as information overload, we need shortcuts to help us make sense of it all quickly and efficiently. Discussing about heuristics. So what are heuristics? How we deal rapidly with large amounts of information is also known as heuristics. So, heuristics are mental shortcuts. What are heuristics? They are mental shortcuts and they are also known as rules of thumb. So, they help us make quick decisions without having to analyze every detail. They are like GPS shortcuts. They get us to our destination faster, but sometimes they may not be the most accurate route. Talking about representativeness, so when we judge by resemblance, what is it? We judge how likely someone belongs to a group based on how much they resemble our mental image, which is a prototype of that group, right? So, giving you an example, if you meet someone who's quiet, who is organized, who loves books, and dresses conservatively, you might think they are more likely to be a librarian than a salesperson, even though there are actually many more salespeople than librarians in the world, right? So, what is the problem here? We often ignore the base rates, how common something actually is in the population, which can lead to wrong conclusion, right? So here we are ignoring the base rates as to how common something actually is in the population. That is known as a base rate. Okay, so this could lead to wrong conclusions. Now, talking about the cultural differences, people from Asian cultures they tend to consider more factors when making judgments, so they rely less on representativeness than the North Americans do. All right, now coming to availability. So, if I can recall many instances, they must be frequent. Here, if I can recall many instances, recalling many instances, they must be frequent, right? So many people think flying is more dangerous than driving, even though car accidents are much more common. Why is that so? Because plane crashes get much more media coverage, so we can easily remember them. So, if you can easily remember several times you used your phone while driving, you'll think you'll do it often. So, availability heuristic, let me give you a clinically relevant story on it. So, when a teen says that everyone's posting beach pics, my life sucks, but they're only seeing the highlight reel, they're not seeing the reality, right? So, cognitive distortions like catastrophizing and mental filtering are rooted in availability bias. So, here we can look at cognitive distortions, which are rooted in the availability bias. Okay, so why do you think that this happens? Dramatic and vivid events, they are easier to remember, but they are not necessarily more frequent. So, even doctors can be influenced by this bias. So, if they recently learned about a rare disease, they might overdiagnose it in patients who show the similar kind of symptoms, right? Okay, now we just discussed representativeness, we discussed availability. Let's talk about anchoring and adjustment. So, it is in anchoring and adjustment where you start to begin a difference. So, what is it? What is anchoring and what is adjustment? So, we use an initial piece of information. Here, we use an initial piece of information which is the anchor, right? So it is a starting point and then we adjust from there. This is a starting point and then we adjust from there. So our adjustments are usually not enough. Okay. So some of the examples for anchoring and adjustment is negotiating. So if a car seller starts with a high asking price, you'll probably end up paying more than if they started with a lower price, right? So how can be anchoring defined in a classroom experiment? You could ask students to guess Gandhi's age when he died. So the first group gets a hint, was it over 50? The second group gets a hint that was it over 90? Then you see the anchoring in action, right? So here in a clinical setup, the initial impressions of a client, which is based on the referral information, may anchor your interpretation of the symptoms also. Talking about food portions, if you're served a large portion at a restaurant, you're likely to eat more than if you were served a smaller portion, right? If we talk about legal decisions, so even experienced judges can be influenced by sentencing recommendations, whether they come from prosecutors, whether it comes from journalists, or are even chosen randomly, right? Now, we tend to avoid the mental effort that is needed to make big adjustments away from the starting point. So I hope the anchoring and the adjustment is clear. So by now we have covered representativeness, we have covered availability, and we have covered anchoring, which are three forms of heuristics. What is status quo heuristic? So we tend to prefer things that have been around longer, assuming older is better. So people rate chocolate as tasting better when they're told that it's been on the market for 70 years versus 3 years, right? Even when it's the exact same chocolate. The political incumbents have an advantage partly because voters prefer the tried and the true candidate, right? So, painting is rated more beautiful when people think that it was painted in 1905 versus 2005, right? So, the status quo heuristic in real life, it looks like when why do clients resist even beneficial change? Because what is, it feels safer, right? We prefer familiar discomfort over an unfamiliar possibility. So that is all about status quo heuristic. Moving on to schemas. Now, schemas are pretty much frequently asked in the MPhil entrance examinations. These are the mental frameworks for organizing social information. So, schema is how you organize information. So, schemas are mental frameworks that would help us organize and interpret social information. So, you could think of them as a mental filing system that help us know what to expect in different situations. So, you have a schema for going to the doctor, right? So, you could look at this slide. So, you expect to check in, you'd wait, you'd be taken to an examination room, you'd wait more, you'd see the doctor, then you would check out. So, this schema helps you navigate the situation smoothly, right? So, if I ask you that, how would you describe going on a first date? You will get similar steps: dressing up, checking your phone nervously, reaching on time, presenting your best self, right? So these are schemas that are shaping your expectations. So if I show you a video of a professor breakdancing in a class, don't you think that you would recall and you would memorize that video for a long, long time? Why would that happen? Why would you remember that video for a longer duration? Because it violated the professor schema, right? We don't expect a professor to break dance in a class. So while it is breaking or violating the professor schema, you would always retain it for longer durations. So the impact of schemas on social cognition is by attention, encoding, and retrieval. Right? So schemas influence three key processes. First is attention, which is what we notice. Why? Because here schemas act like filters. Right? Then we're talking about encoding. What info do we store in memory? And lastly, we talk about retrieval. What information we remember later. Okay, so the key findings here are that we are more likely to notice information that fits our schema. So, information that fits our schema. That is, we are more likely to retain. We remember more information that's consistent with our schemas, right? So, information that is consistent with our schema is also, it is easily rememberable. However, information that strongly contradicts our schemas can be well remembered because it is so surprising. So, those information which is contradicting our schema, like I just gave the example of a professor breakdancing in a class, that also can be well remembered because it is so surprising. So, if you have a schema that professors lecture and give exams, you will definitely remember the day your professor performed magic tricks instead of teaching, right?